All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of the Rankin Technical College. And as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD, or Application and Website Development Program, and in particular, the AWD1100 C# Programming Language Fundamentals class, I've been doing a series of video presentations based on the textbook for the class, which, as you can see on the screen here, is Murock's C# 2015. So far, I've gone through and done all the chapters for Section 1, Section 2, and Section 3. I'm finishing up from Section 4, the database programming chapters, so I'm jumping right back into that right now. All right, we just finished talking about CRUD, which is create, which is also known as insert. All right, read, which is also known as select, update, and delete. So we have just looked at those. Now what we're talking about here, if you look on the screen, .NET Data Provider Core Objects. These are things that we can use to connect to a database and work with it. So what you'll notice if we look here is we have 4 different things shown here. We've got connection. A connection is a type of object which, as it says, establishes a database connection. All right. Command, which represents an SQL statement that you can execute against the database. When you start to write programs, C# or really any other language programs that are going to manipulate a database, you have to write them. It's sort of a combination of what we've been looking at with databases and programming, and command allows you to do that. All right, we've got a data reader, which is also called a fire hose. And if I have 100 records in a database and I set up a data reader, it will allow me to read record 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, etc., all the way through 100. I can only go in a forward direction, so I can't back up and look at a record I've already passed up. Finally, we've got a data adapter, which, as it says, it provides a link between the command object and the connection object, all right, and a dataset object. All right. Now, data providers, it says, included with the .NET framework. What we're going to work with is SQL Server in some depth and breadth of coverage. We'll also look at OLEDB. All right. And there's also something that's called ODBC. All right. OLE is object linking and embedding. DB, of course, is database. And ODBC is open database connectivity. ODBC is a little different kind of animal, and what I mean by that is with ODBC types of connection, not will it only support any database that supports ODBC, but it'll even allow you to support with things that are not databases. All right, so notice connection, SQL connection, they all look the same except what is the prefix, SQL, OLE, or ODB. When you start working with this stuff, as it says, you need a using parameter in here, and in particular, that using parameter that you need in there is system.data.sql client. So here are the basic components, not actually the easiest diagram in the world to look at, but what they're talking about here is the ability for you to go in and manipulate, to go in and actually manipulate a database with code. All right. Now notice here they're talking about 2 users working with copies of the same data. All right. This can be a bad thing, believe it or not, because if 2 people are working on the same data and at the same time, or virtually the same time, they try to change that data and then write those changes out, typically what's going to happen is the last person to write things out, it's also known as the last in wins. All right. So as they mention here under concurrency concepts, when 2 or more users retrieve the data in the same row at the same time, it's called concurrency. All right, because ADO.NET uses a disconnected data architecture, the database management can't stop that from happening. So when that happens, as it says, if the first user writes and then the second user writes, the second user's changes can overwrite the changes made by the first user. Whether or not that happens, as it says here, depends on what type of concurrency control you use. By default, what's used by ADO.NET is something known as optimistic concurrency, meaning that the program, as it says here, will check to see whether the row that's going to be updated or deleted has been changed since it's been retrieved by the user. And if it has, it throws a concurrency exception and it does not allow any update or deletion to take place. All right, the program, as it says there, will then have to handle the data. On the other hand, if you don't have optimistic concurrency in effect, the program does not check to see whether or not the row has been changed. This is typically called last in wins, and whoever saves last, their changes will overwrite the changes made by anyone or anything else. So how do you keep that from happening? As mentioned here, for many applications, concurrency errors rarely occur. All right? But if it's likely to, and think about who would be likely to occur with, probably it'd be more likely to occur in something like, I don't know, Amazon, than it would, for example, Rankin Technical College. All right? So if concurrency is likely to be a problem, a program that uses a data set can be designed so it updates the database and refreshes the data set frequently. All right, it's kind of like when you have a document and you save often, that kind of thing. And in that way, as mentioned here, concurrency errors are less likely to happen. Another alternative is to design a program so it retrieves and updates only a row at a time. That way there's less chance of this two users wanting to change the exact same record or row at the same time. So this is the hierarchy, and you'll notice that a data table, this shouldn't surprise you. A table is made up of columns and rows. Those columns and rows can have constraints, all right, set up with them. So ADO.NET components for accessing a database directly, well, notice select, insert, update, delete, should all sound familiar to you. When you do this, you can use something called the data sources window, which I believe in the next chapter we're going to take a look at. So when we start to write this stuff, notice our command, when we run it, we're running it on virtually a database command. All right, and that's pretty much it for this chapter. So I'm going to hold up, and when I come back again, we will go over the next chapter, which is Chapter 18. And Chapter 18, close out 17, that I just have open here. So Chapter 18 will be on how to work with data sources and data sets, and I'll be back with that shortly.